This is the 7th annual LGBT Heritage Month. It is not the 7th time that a council member stood at this podium to do a pride celebration in this council. For the first few years, this was a pride celebration that Mr. Rosendahl organized as the only LGBT elected in the city, and it took a few years before it became a full Heritage Month. And it is vitally important that it be a full Heritage Month, because these Heritage Months that we celebrate here in Los Angeles in these chambers have two purposes. One is outward-facing, which is to tell others not of that community about the traditions and the strength and the inspiring stories of a community. And it's also inward-facing. It's a celebration of pride. It's a reminder to ourselves in that community of who we are. But for the LGBT community, that second part, that inward-facing part of the Heritage Month celebration, is even more vitally important, because we do not pass down our history, our tradition, our stories, our heritage in the same way that others do. Because very few gay children have gay parents, we do not have the Passover tradition, where we gather together every year and share a story of thousands of years of what our community has done and how our community has struggled and how our community has survived. We don't gather beside a Christmas tree and hear stories of the generations that came before and what they did and how they built the life that we lead today. So our young generations don't have the benefit of that built-in heritage being passed on. So young people today may not know that one of the brightest times worldwide in LGBT history preceded one of the darkest in pre-World War II Germany. There are young people today who don't know of the horrors and the ravages of the AIDS epidemic, or how the lesbian community banded together to save their sick and dying brothers. We don't have a built-in mechanism to tell each other about the Black Cat, or about Stonewall, or about Matthew Shepard, or about Elaine Noble. We all know Harvey Milk. The first LGBT elected official in the United States was Elaine Noble, a lesbian state legislator from Massachusetts who gets too often lost to history. We don't pass on those stories. And one of the things that's particularly unique to the LGBT community is we have a built-in invisibility. Unless we proactively say, against the presumption of society that we are straight, that we are LGBT or Q, people assume that we are straight. So in the dichotomy we all face between acquiescence or activism or impatience and being invisible, it's a harder burden for us to make that choice. It's a more courageous, deliberate action. And the LGBT community has been all over the place with victories and defeats for the past decade. You know, folks were pushed from acquiescence into activism by Prop 8. Folks were pushed into celebrating themselves by the Supreme Court decision about marriage. And folks have been pushed back into activism and angry protest because of what's happening in states like North Carolina, what's happening in places like Chechnya, and what's happening in Washington, D.C. every single day. We are really faced with a crisis and a choice between that acceptance and that acquiescence versus the activism, between incrementalism and between an impatient insistence on change and standing up and protest and resistance. Right now, Mitchell talked about it so well, we are facing in this country not just an assault against the LGBT community, as we are in various places, but an existential threat to this country, to democracy, to the rule of law, to having a just society, to civil rights and to civil liberties. And let today be a day for the LGBT community to acknowledge and stand up and say, we are in this struggle not just for ourselves, but for everyone and with everyone. Because there's an undeniable truth is that the people who are making discriminatory rules about bathrooms against our transgender sister and brothers are the same people who are denying science and climate change and pulling out of the Kyoto protocols. They are the same people. The people who are objecting to the Employment Non-Discrimination Act are the same people approving Trump care and stripping millions of people of health care and consigning them to illness and possible death. The same people who have opposed marriage equality are the same people who are opposing comprehensive, compassionate immigration reform. The same people who propose reparative therapy for struggling LGBT youth coming out of the closet. They are the same people who deny racism and who oppose criminal justice reform. The same people who wanted sodomy laws and who can't get the hell out of our bedrooms are the same people who can't get the hell out of a woman's uterus and are standing up and objecting to reproductive rights. The same people who oppose anti-bullying legislation in our schools, they're the same people who oppose all the sensible gun control laws that we need in this country. Right. And the people who are finding bully pulpits on the internet or in Congress or in the Oval Office to preach hate and intolerance are the same people who are leaving people in poverty, who are trying to kill unions, who are trying to kill the programs like CalFresh, who are objecting to the minimum wage. It is the absolute same thing, and it is a mutual struggle that we as the LGBT community need to be a part of. As a community, the LGBT community, our existence is threatened in parts of the world. People are literally being killed. And our dignity and our civil rights are being threatened in places around this country. Our existence depends on our resistance. And that resistance must be collective, and it must be joint, and it must be not just about us, but about everybody. So let's make that the message of Heritage Month today. Thank you very much.